Hi guys, well in this video I'm going to speak about the 4% rule and why it's flawed. But before I do so, I guess I have to talk about where it came from. Well, it was first postulated, that's a great word, postulated by a guy called William Bengen, who was a financial advisor in Cincinnati. And what he tried to establish was, given him an amount of funds in an investment fund, how much could he safely withdraw so that it would last for 30 years? And so what he did was he went back to the previous 75 years of stock market performance, and he calculated that the worst place to retire, the worst time to retire, would have been October 1968. Because after October 1968, there was a 14-year bear market where stocks were slumped, rampant inflation. That meant there was no return in the stock market, and all bonds were effectively shredded. And he said that was the worst time to retire. But he still calculated that he could still safely withdraw 4% if you retired at that stage. Now, here's the first place where people get confused, because what people think about the 4% rule is that once you've got your fund, and if you take out 4%, then over that time you will still have your principal left. That is to say, if you put £100,000 in and you withdraw 4% over whatever period, you'd still have £100,000 at the end. Not so. What William Bengen calculated was that over 30 years it would dwindle down to nothing, so you had to die in the 30th year because you had nothing left in your fund. Anyways, go forward a little bit, and something called the Trinity study looked at it again, so-called the Trinity study because it was done by 3 professors from Trinity College. And so using the same data, they came up with the same conclusion, that the number was 4%. Now, using the 4% rule, you can calculate how much you need in a pot in order for the 4% rule to work. And the 4% rule's case, that is 25 times your salary. Why? Well, because 4% of something multiplied by 25 will give you 100% of something. So as an example, if you earn £20,000 a year and you want to replace that in retirement, then you times your £20,000 by 25 times, so which gives you £500,000. Now my problem with that is that discourages people from wanting to save, because if you tell the guy in the street who's on 20 grand a year that he needs to save £500,000, he'll say, mate, I'm struggling to scratch together enough to get 2 weeks in Benidorm every year, and you want me to save about 25 times my salary? Well, it's not going to happen, so I may as well not bother, and I'll just continue to work right through retirement, which is what most people have to do. So William Bengen looked at it again and came back recently and said, yeah, but you know, that 4% was based upon that 14-year slump in the stock market, which was caused by a unique set of circumstances which will probably never ever repeat themselves. And so that 14-year distorts the figures. And if I take it out, the real rule, if you want to call it, still want to call it rule, is 7%, which makes a hell of a difference, because now it's 7%, you only need 14 times your salary, because 7 times 14 is almost 100. Which is a massive difference from 25 times your salary to 14. And he went on to say, and sometimes, you know, because of the performance of the stock market, it could be as high as 13%, which means you only need 8 times your salary, because 8 times, well, you get the idea where we're going with this. And he said, plus, he says, I used a conservative bag of shares, 50% of which were made up by low-yielding bonds. Now, if you're like me and you put the whole thing into a Vanguard ETF, so it's all in stocks and shares, that would reduce the amount you need to save even further. So it turns out the 4% rule isn't a rule at all. It's almost complete bollocks. But if you say it often enough, as it's said by the financial advisors and the so-called financial YouTube gurus, it becomes a law. But it's not a law. It's, if anything, if it's a rule, it's a rule of thumb, and that really just depends how big your thumb is. And as I say to my wife, size doesn't matter. So if ever you hear someone say the 4% rule, I want you to put your hand up, stand up in the seminar and say, by the way, did you know the 4% rule is flawed and actually the number's closer to 7%? And when they ask you who told you, you say, well, actually it was the author himself, the principal, the original author, William Bengen. And if you want further information, send them a copy of this video. Don't be stupid and don't be normal, guys.